Technology's good when it works. Maybe I'll get some support here from tech. There we go. Good morning. I would like to thank the Business Development Company for inviting me here, as well as the previous guest speakers and Republic Bank, and it's just an honor to be here. I'm from Canada, so if you hear a Canadian accent, we're guilty of saying things like "a." That's a Canadian thing. I wish I was a Trini. I've only been here 2 days, and I feel like I would like to be an honorary Trini, as I've been told. What I'd like to do this morning is share with you Bridging the Gap, Managing the Generations in the Workplace. And a couple things I'll share with you. I do talk fast, so hopefully everybody can, and I know Trinis talk fast as well, so I think this will be okay. So I talk fast, I move fast. I have a lot of information to give you in a very short period of time. I will be available for question and answer. I am interactive as well, so there is some interaction that I ask of you as well. So to start, I want to have a little bit of fun here. And if you could put your hands up to the people you're seated beside. Don't worry about germs. We'll get you some hand washer later on, or hand sanitizer. But if you could put your hands up to the people you're seated beside at your table. And don't worry about going all the way around the table, just to the people you're seated beside, please. And if you could, without indicating who's going to do what, someone push. Go now. Right. All right, hands down. So we have a room full of highly intelligent people in this room. And let me ask you, what did we all do when I asked you to do that exercise? We pushed. We pushed because as human beings, for every action, there's an equal and opposite. See how smart you are? Here's the thing. In the 80s in business, in the 90s in business, and even the early 2000s, pushing back was something that happened in the leadership and business communities, and it actually happened without us maybe knowing it. For the baby boomers in the room, you'll be very familiar with this. And when I talk about pushing back, what I mean is autocratic, dictatorial style of leadership that actually led to employees being unhappy. They might have done what their bosses asked them to do, but they would do it reluctantly and not be overly happy or excited about their work. What we want to be doing in 2012 and beyond, and what we'll be speaking about this morning, is be flexible, adaptable, malleable as leaders and business owners. And I think one of the reasons any of you in this room is an entrepreneur in the first place, it's to be flexible, adaptable, and malleable. And I know for myself, I've been an entrepreneur since 1996, and I actually consider myself unemployable at this stage of my life. I don't think I'm employable by any organization because the joys of entrepreneurism are too high. How many of you in this room love being an entrepreneur for the freedom? Yes, lots of hands. How many of this room love being an entrepreneur for your financial freedom, the ability to decide how much money you'll make or not make? How many of you wish you were making more money? The joys of entrepreneurism are high, and so being flexible and malleable, though, as it relates to managing people, as it relates to customer service, are really important in today's environment. So do me a favor, put your hands up again, palm to palm, with the people you're seated beside. And this time, without indicating who's going to do what, someone give slightly, someone push, whoever decides to do what, doesn't matter who does what, go now. Yes. Yes, okay. So typically that third time, 3 different things happen. That second time you did that exercise, 3 different things happen. Number 1, neither person pushed. Did any of you experience that? Yes. Now, if you're someone whose personality is that, somebody's got to do something, that would be frustrating for you. But as leaders and as entrepreneurs, how many of you in this room, even as parents, how many of you in this room would agree when managing the generations, sometimes it's best to say or do absolutely nothing. And that is an actual strategy. And as a leader, it's a strategy that I think we could use more often than not. Second thing that happened in that exercise, if you were the person pushing, you might be highly aggressive. You can come and talk to me afterwards. If you were the person pushing, but the other person was giving, you would have found yourself easing up on the pushing. okay? Which is fascinating because from a business standpoint, it means that, oh, if I have the power of giving, and for those of you that gave, you actually hold a lot of power. A lot of people feel that if they give, they're losing power, but that's actually where the power is. And I'm not talking about giving in or giving up, I'm talking about being flexible. So as a leader, if we're flexible, if we adapt to the generations, then we're actually increasing the power and the responsiveness of the people around us. It's quite powerful. So I really want to share with you some of the categories of generations. And when we talk about the generations, I'm not coming at it from putting people in boxes. This isn't about limiting ourselves. It's about identifying generational values and how they impact business. And by looking at the generational values, looking at how we ourselves can be more flexible in adapting to the realities of what's happening. The previous speakers before me, Dr. Ramkinson, mentioned, the generations are infiltrating, and is very relevant. It's relevant because what's happened is technology has changed the rules for all of us. So let's look at some of the goals of today's session. The first goal that we have is, of course, I want you to leave here with my session to better understand the generations. By understanding the generations, it increases loyalty in the workplace. Just a quick statistic, Generation Y, which was explained demographically. I'll give you a simple version of remembering the generations, which I'll share with you in a moment. But increasing the loyalty, Generation Y, which is the youngest generation in the workforce right now, typically, and it is dependent on culture and size of country and organization, there's different factors here, but typically Generation Y will only stay with their employer for an average of about 3 years. And that's if they're happy, okay? If they're not happy, they're leaving at an average of about 6 months. And how many of you in this room have experienced this? I see some heads nodding in agreement, okay? So if you're a baby boomer, you might think that they are disloyal. You might have some generalizations around them that says, they have a lack of a work ethic. They don't care as much. They're disloyal. Those would all be generalizations and judgments that we make, but they're not necessarily true, and I'm going to share more with you this morning on that. By the way, for those of you taking notes, the entire PDFs, there will be a PDF of my presentation made available to you through the BDC, and I will give you the link to my website to have that as well. So increasing loyalty in the workplace. And then I'm going to share with you 8 tips to manage and lead the generations, because quite frankly, as entrepreneurs, we want to know how we can use this information to make a difference in our business. And as I mentioned, the handout is on my website, and I'll make that available. You have some advantages in Trinidad that I've observed in the short time that I've been here. First of all, your education focus is very exciting. I can't think of other comparable programs where you continue to educate your younger people to the level of up to as high as a master's degree, as was shared to me by Nadia. Now that advantage, and I say it's an advantage because most countries lose their youth to other locations, and I understand that some of that still happens here as well, but the fact that you do educate to the level that you do is a high strategic advantage globally, and that's something that's very exciting. Your culture is very attractive. I wish I could live here because I too would like to celebrate as often as you celebrate here. So your culture is a wonderful, really enjoyable opportunity that you have. And because of your size, you have the opportunity to adapt very quickly to situations and global change. And these are all advantages that you hold as a culture. So let me share with you some of the things that I have created and researched and observed in my work with organizations worldwide. First of all, we're working towards a 2020 workplace. A 2020 workplace means that we must have aligned vision with our teams of the multi-generations. It also means that we must have an aligned focus and energy. And so it takes specific leadership skill to do this successfully. If you look at the diagram, this is a process visual that I've created. And I want you to notice that the 4 circles, and then the goal is that every one of us as entrepreneurs become integrated leaders. An integrated leader is someone who has really developed the 4 quadrants of leadership, which is to be process-driven. You've really developed your processes around your business to increase the business success. That you have vision, you're able to see the global impact on your business. You're able to see the opportunity of export. You're able to see the opportunity of increasing the training that you do on customer service and skill development. Empathetic. That means that we care about the people that we work with and the people that work for us, but that we also care about our customers. The best businesses globally that continue to succeed and to thrive in any economic culture have these four factors in place. And then the final one is directing. In other words, you're able to move, implement, innovate, and using a North American word, execute the vision. You're able to move things forward and implement the plans that have been created. So this is what we're moving towards when we talk about the 2020 workplace. So let's get right into the generations. Now, I know we talked about 4 generations. My focus this morning is on 3. The traditionalists, or the matures as they're called, that was mentioned. Those are people that are 68 and older. Okay, so I'm going to give you the ages, not the years that they were born. And again, even though we're giving the demographic information here, I want to know that you could be a baby boomer in this room right now and behave more like a Gen Y. You could be a Gen Y in this room right now, and you could behave more like a baby boomer or a Zoomer. So there's no strict guideline. I know many people. I'm a Gen X Zoomer cusper, just to complicate things, all right? And I'm very open, and so I'm 48 years old, and I was born in 1963, so that makes me a Gen X Zoomer cusper. A Zoomer, by the way, is a baby boomer who refuses to age. And it was coined by a Canadian. His name is Moses Zamer, and he created a magazine called Zoomer Magazine. And I do encourage you to check out the website. It's zoomermag.com if you're interested in checking that out, zoomermag.com. So we'll be focusing on these 3 generations for the purpose of my presentation this morning. So Zoomers, you're in your late 40s to your late 60s. Gen Xers, you're in your 30s to your late 40s. And you're a Gen Y if you're in your 20s to your early 30s. There's a lot of things that have shaped each of us from our generational attitudes. For those of you in this room who are Zoomers, you are the children of the traditionalists or the matures. And regardless of culture and regardless of where we live in the world globally, what I'm sharing with you is true for every culture. They're all experiencing these generational gaps in their family life, but also in their work life. And so if you look at those Zoomers of us that are in the room, our parents were the traditionalists, and our parents raised us with these kinds of values. Work hard, and by the way, different cultures will have more of this or less of this, depending on the cultural nature. But work hard, get a job, stay there for life, get married, stay married for life. Okay, so this is familiar to some of us in this room. And so for Zoomers or baby boomers, we grew up believing that that was the ticket to happiness. The ticket to happiness was if I work hard, if I stay loyal, then I'll be happy. But the world changed for the Zoomer, because the world for the Zoomer, for those of you that graduated high school when I did, 1981, I entered the world of a recession. How many of you remember the interest rates in the world of 1981? And so for me, everything my parents had told me wasn't true, because now I was entering an uncertain environment where I wasn't even sure if I had guaranteed job security, but my parents' voice totally echoed into my mind when I got my first job, because what did all of us in this room who are Zoomers do? We got our first job and we did what the boss told us to do. We actually listened to authority. If our boss said to us, do this or you're fired, we did it, because we were afraid that if we gave back or pushed back on authority, we might not have a job, we had bills to pay, and our culture is that when we left home, it wasn't an open door policy. How many of you left home and your parents said, don't come back? Not because our parents were bad people, but that was the generation. Now, conversely to that, for those of us in this room who are Zoomers, we are the parents of the Gen X and Y. If you have a problem with Gen X and Y, we have created the problem. If you're sitting in this room and you're afraid of Generation Y, be very afraid of millennials, which are your children. So anyone younger than 20, if you think we're being challenged now with the new emerging trends and sensibilities of Generation X and Y, the next 6, 7, 8 years will be very interesting in how it changes the dynamics of how we run our businesses globally. It's no longer a country issue. This is a global issue. Everything that we're talking about here is global. It's beyond our individual locations and where we're from. And it's all about perspective. Take a look at that diagram. How many faces can you see in that diagram? Take a few moments. Anyone want to shout out a number that's coming to them? 20? Dr. Ramkinson, 20? Anyone else? 9? 12? 16? There are actually 15 faces in that diagram. Okay, so Dr. Ramkinson wins the prize. The point is, with perspective, is that we can have our viewpoints. So if you're a baby boomer and you do have the judgment that says, oh, these Generation Y don't have the same work ethic, and they're not loyal, and there's so much high maintenance, that is a perspective based on your values. If you're a Generation Y in the room and you say, those baby boomers, they're just so structured, they don't know anything about technology, that would be a judgment based on your perspective. And so it's important to realize that as we talk about generations, our perspectives shape our interactions with each other. I mentioned when I started that technology created the gap. When you think of sites like Yammer or Facebook, or the fact that text communication or BBMing, how many of you in this room, you can phone your 20-something or your younger child and they will not answer, but you text them or BBM them and you get an instant response? There's actually a whole language that goes along with texting. There's a website called netlingo.com, if you'd like to check that out. So, you know, the acronyms like TTYL, talk to you later, or LOL, laugh out loud. Well, there's a few others that you need to know. MOS, mother over shoulder. Or PAW, parents are watching. Okay. There's some that we do need to know as parents. You know, if we look at YouTube and apps and what else, technology's created the gap. And so it's unfair to say that, you know, boomers or traditionalists are not tech savvy, but we cannot ignore the fact that technology for anyone born after 1980 is completely innate versus learned. And that is the distinction. For anyone in this room who's older, I told you I'm 48 years old. When I grew up on a small farm in Canada. And when I grew up, we didn't have a television until I was 10 years old. We had telephones, but we had what you call party lines. When people worry about privacy on Facebook, we worried about privacy with the party line. If I say to my 23-year-old daughter, Courtney, today, when I was your age, we had to walk 3 miles to catch the bus to get to school. We had party lines. She looks at me and she goes, really? She can't even understand that reality. And so technology has created the gap that we're finding ourselves in with the generations. And let's look a little bit more at this as we look at this. So how many of you and some of you may still use, I call it old school, new school, okay? Then and now. So some of you may use some of the old school. There's no judgment here. It's just noticing the technology gap, okay? The date book. Being a manager, I got promoted very young, and when I was in banking, I got promoted to the role of a branch manager at the age of 23. And I remember going through the trainings of Stephen Covey with the date book and having everything coded and all of those things so that I could be really organized. And now everything's done through, I'm a Mac person, so everything's done through iCal or iPhone, or everything's so centralized. Google Calendar I use all the time. By the way, just a quick story, just for my banker friends, and I hope that this hasn't happened and it won't happen to any of you in this room, but the reason I got promoted when I was in banking is I was good at handling robberies. It's a true story. And so I was 23 years old, and one day I was working in customer service, and without any warning, 2 guys with masks and sawed-off shotguns came into the bank and ordered everybody to the floor. And everybody got to the floor except for me. I was in complete shock. And I stood there until one of the gunmen came to me, put the gun to my head, and he said, I said, get to the floor. And so I look at him and I go, well, why didn't you say so in the first place? Not very smart. And then I get to the floor, and I'm on the floor, and I have 2 thoughts. Number 1, man, am I stupid? And number 2, we really need to clean these carpets. And when the robbery was over, I got up and I called the police, and I was able to give descriptions, and the next robbery was 2 weeks later. The same 2 fellows. They were robbing to support their drug habit. And this time the gun was in my ribs, not at my head. And I behaved exactly the same way. And my boss came to me after the second robbery and said, "You handle yourself really well under pressure. We'd like to promote you." And they promoted me to the second highest robbery branch in the city. It's a true story. And once I got transferred to manage the branch, I was in charge of 9 people, all of them older than me. And I got to run that branch, and I was there for a year. And in the year that I was there, we got robbed 10 more times. Now, imagine yourself, for the baby boomers in the room, again, when I share that story with a room full of Gen Ys, they always look at me and go, "Are you crazy? Why didn't you just quit?" I was a baby boomer. I thought that's what I was supposed to do, is to handle what my boss told me to do, and so I did it. I want you to know that I was very good at handling robberies, but I was not a good leader. And the reason I wasn't a good leader is I hadn't had any training. Nobody had exposed me to the concepts of leadership. Until my boss said, "You need leadership training," and sent me away, and I realized very quickly that I needed to improve my leadership. So every one of us in this room has our strengths and our weaknesses. But I do recall the date book in the Stephen Covey when I was in my banking career. If you look at maps, paper maps used to be the norm. Now a lot of people have switched to GPS. By the way, Generation Y believes that email is archaic. They actually prefer texting or instant messaging through Skype and Facebook. Those are their preferred methods of communicating. The days of games around the table, some of you may still have family time with games, but a lot of people are playing games on their phone now. Words with friends, you can play Scrabble on your phone. You can play Draw Something on your phone. There's all these different games. Home videos, now you can take video with your phone. Phone books, now you can use all sorts of technology to solve our problems with that. So that's really what's created the biggest opportunity to look at the generational challenges. So if you look at the different sensibilities of each of the generations, you'll notice with Generation Y, they're very fast-paced. They actually like change. When we did the exercise of pushing back, you'll find that most Gen Ys, when it comes to change, they're wanting to move and go and keep moving. That's something that's appealing to them. One of the reasons Gen Y wants fast pace and change, it's all they've known since they were born. Okay? They've only known how to move quickly, adjust quickly, change. Gen X wants balance. For those of you in this room who are Generation X, you've watched your baby boomer counterparts and you've said, "Wow, they've worked really hard, but they don't have much of a life." And so Generation X says, "I want to have a life. I want to be able to spend more time with my family." Culturally, I believe you're very family focused, and that's an advantage you have. In the North American culture, a lot of Gen X have really realized that working crazy hours and not being able to be there for the family is not something that appeals to them at all. And then, of course, there's the baby boomers who have had a little bit more resistance around change. And we're generalizing here, but the resistance has been about the level of adaptation to technology. And that's been the major difference. The other thing that's a challenge is silos, and this happens in all generations, in all organizations. So depending on the size of your business, a lot of times silos can get created. And those silos can be, operations is a silo, marketing is a silo, human resources is a silo. And that silo effect creates disconnect and lack of unified vision towards moving forward. So the larger your organization, the more you would know and experience the silo effect. What organizations are noticing globally is that they have to break down those silos, increase the synergy and connection between departments in order to move business forward. And then the other challenge is identity, personal and institution, and this too is a challenge for all generations. And let me just talk a little bit about identity. Interestingly enough, I had a great conversation with Robert from TCM, and we were talking about different sensibilities around business and cultural sensibilities. And one of the things that's very clear is, as leaders, we have to really notice that everyone has their own identity. So we're talking about generations this morning, but also there's identity around gender. There's identity around your communication style. There's identity around who you work for. A lot of times your identity becomes your brand or who you work for. And that is shifting because here's the thing, baby boomers very much have aligned themselves to the brand of who they've worked for. So, and when I was in banking, you would proudly say, "I work for the bank," and you would say that for me when I was there. Now as an entrepreneur, I would say I'm an entrepreneur and that's my identity. But the attachment to our identity determines our success in interacting with other people. So for example, you could be I'll use the healthcare industry, which is another industry that I work in. You could be a doctor or surgeon, and your identity might be, I am the doctor or surgeon, therefore I'm the most authoritative person here. But that kind of identity attachment is not useful or conducive to team in the healthcare industry. Does that make sense to everyone? So if you're attached to the ego of the identity, that does not move business forward. If you're able to look at your identity objectively and say, yes, I'm the owner of this business, and as the owner of this business, I'm human, and I need to connect and relate to everybody within the business, that's the success moving forward of all business. So it's not allowing ego attachment to identity, but it's being very objective about our identity as we interact with others. And this is important. Now, the reason it's important is Generation Y has zero loyalty to a institutional brand. How many of you have noticed that? They don't really care who they work for. And if you're a Gen Y in the room, please don't be offended. I'm generalizing, because here's the thing. Their identity is their self. They see themselves as renegades, entrepreneurs, individuals, not tied to a brand. So as entrepreneurs and business owners, if we try to say to a Gen Y, I want you to be loyal to my company, because by being loyal to my company, you can be somebody in 15 years. Gen Y looks at you like you're crazy. They're not sticking around for 15 years. So the difference is, it's not about loyalty, it's about reality of the new world. The other reality of the new world is we're a global workforce. A Gen Y knows that they're not restricted to stay in any one place in order to further their career or their life. And it's not that baby boomers didn't know that, or Gen X, but baby boomers and Gen X were much more about keeping a little bit more stability. And then baby boomers always say to me, well, that will change when they have families. Doesn't change. Let me tell you what happens to 20-somethings when they have families. They still will relocate faster than a boomer or a Gen X ever would have. Because they're willing to go to opportunity, they're less attached to identity. And it's quite fascinating from a psychological standpoint. So let's look further at the generation's impact. Zoomers right now are really about reinventing. In fact, in North America, they're saying that Zoomers aren't retiring, they're refiring. And what that means, and I know some of you in this room are experiencing this, where you've got really talented baby boomers who have really worked hard on the job, they've earned lots of knowledge, they have lots to share, they're still highly valuable. And the average baby boomer thought they might retire at the age of, between 55 and 65, and the global economy has changed that for everyone. North American statistic, the average baby boomer will not retire until the age of 75. Now, it depends on how you look at retirement here. If you think that retirement is you get to stop working and just golf or play games for the rest of your life, the new look on retirement is changing your identity. So now what I'm encountering in the government sector, in the healthcare sector, the finance sector, is baby boomers are saying, I've actually worked for this organization for 35 years. They actually retire, and then they get hired back on contract. And I know that's happening a lot here. And that trend is going to continue. Okay? So what that means for you as a business owner is there's a huge opportunity for that type of employee, in my opinion, because they don't want to work necessarily the same hours that they used to work pre-retirement. They want more freedom. They want more flexibility. They're willing to work on contract. There's all sorts of advantages to hiring and working with a baby boomer or a Zoomer. They now are realizing that they do want balance as well. A lot of Zoomers, the attitude used to be work, 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 and then you die. Not so fun. Now a lot of Zoomers are saying, no, I don't want to wait till I'm retired to have a life. I'm actually going to live my life now, and by collecting my pension, if that's true for them, and by continuing to work on contract, I can supplement my lifestyle. But there's another reason why baby boomers are deciding to continue to work, and that is to support their Gen Ys in the lifestyle that they have become accustomed to. The average Gen Y will not leave home, and again, this is a North American statistic, the average Gen Y will not leave home until the age of 29. Now, in this room, if you're sitting here going, my child's off at university, they're coming back. At least once. And the difference is, we actually enjoy spending time with our children. How many of you like that your children still live at home? Okay? And if you're really truthful, you don't have to raise your hand for this one, but you might be quietly thinking, please don't leave me with him or her. I say that jokingly, but you all know what I'm talking about. So the difference is about lifestyle. So Generation Y, everybody said, oh, Generation Y, when with this economy, they're all going to realize that they need to work harder. Guess what happened? They just stayed home longer. If you say to a Generation Y, do this or you're fired, they look at you and they go, huh? They don't even understand, or it doesn't compute, because they're like, well, no, I don't understand threat. I don't understand what you're telling me. I'm not happy here. Okay, I guess I need to go find another job. So as leaders, our opportunity is to adapt to and understand their sensibilities so that we can make the workplace more malleable and acceptable and happy for everyone. Gen X are at a stage in their life where it is about career change. The average Gen X will change careers about 7 to 9 times in their lifetime. The average baby boomer, it has been 3 to 5. And for the Gen Y, guess how many careers they will change in their lifetime? And that's today's prediction. About up to 20 times. Yeah. Because again, it's about identity. They don't see themselves as one thing. They don't limit themselves to one job or one industry. They see themselves as going to what's fun and exciting and enjoyable, and how they can learn and grow. As business owners, the best thing you can do to keep a Gen Y engaged is to teach them as much as you know as fast as you can. And I know that seems like, why would I do that? They're just going to leave me, or they're going to go somewhere else, because it's the new culture and every organization needs to do this. And what it's creating is a new modern type of culture. In areas of Europe, they're very savvy with this, and what they've done is created pools of talent. So what they've done is they've got people that have, they can only get so far within their organization, but then they've pooled and linked with like-minded industries and said, hey, I've got some great Gen Ys working for me. When it's time to promote them, I can only get them so far. Do you have other opportunities in your organization? So they're sharing databases of talent rather than lose them to other industries. So when you're hiring Gen Y and you're a small company, you can't promise them that they'll be the president. But what you can say to them is, in the space of time that you're with us, here's what you'll learn in the first 3 months, here's what you'll learn in the first 6 months, here's where you can go in the next year. You want to give them short-term goals and short-term gains so that they can stay engaged with you. Okay? So the Generation Y, entrepreneurial by nature. Another statistic, when we look at job growth rate in any country, or unemployment rate, the thing that troubles me about those percentages is they don't couple in the factor for entrepreneurism. Because what we're not measuring is how many people are choosing to be an entrepreneur versus be employed by an employer. And what I've found, especially in America, this is happening, and in Canada, is that the unemployment rate shows high, but it's not showing new growth and business development for entrepreneurism as a result. And that's the choice. Gen Ys are the highest risk. They're actually willing to risk in order to be an entrepreneur. I've been staying here at the Hyatt since Monday, and I went to have a coffee yesterday after I came back with my meetings from business development company. Young gentleman was serving me at the coffee stand. Lovely young man, very friendly, engaging, talking to me. And he said, may I ask you what you do for work? And I said, I'm a consultant. And he said, does that mean you're an entrepreneur? And I said, yes. He said, exact words, damn, I want to be an entrepreneur. He was 20-something. That's the attitude, and pardon the language, of an entrepreneur, of a Gen Y. That's the attitude, is they want to have the ability. Now, what does that mean to you as a business owner? It means how much freedom and flexibility can you offer them within your business? And these are important questions to ask. In our day, I make it sound like we're old, but for those baby boomers of us in the room, when we got a job, we had to figure things out. It was like sink or swim. But today, if you say to a Gen X or Y, figure it out, they actually feel that they're not being supported to succeed, and they will not stick around. They want you to give them every possible success tool that can be given to them so that they can be fast and successful and knowledgeable. One of the things I say for large organizations, the biggest threat that I feel is to the business is the number of baby boomers who have knowledge, who are not downloading what they know to their Gen X and Y people that are working with them. That is a danger for large organizations. Smaller organizations, more opportunity for that interchange. And so you can see that this generation's impact is huge.
The big boys want to
This is
see
a
you
movie clip
upstairs.
on old style,
Which
North
floor?
American
20th?
style leadership. Take a look.
26th? 32nd? Not the 51st!
Congratulations, Mr. Harper.
Go ahead and wrap this up.
Okay.
How do I look?
Great.
Anything in my teeth?
No.
I need a paper bag. Hey, Oz.
Dick. Morning.
It is, isn't it? Sure is.
Yeah. Hey, did you hear about Bill?
Oh, yeah, that's wild.
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder who's going to take his place.
That's the big mystery.
Yeah. You getting off?
Not this time, Oz.
Son of a...
I believe I can fly. I believe I can touch the sky. Every night and every cloudy day. Spread my wings and fly away. I believe I can soar. Catch me going through that open door. I believe I can fly. I believe.
Yeah. Very much about each man for himself, very much about competition, very much about, we have to win. The new global economy is all about the opposite to that, collaboration. Everybody gets to win. Now, of course, there's still going to be promotions and opportunities and that kind of thing. But what's shifted with generations is they're not so much about, it's funny, have you noticed that with Generation Y, if you give them a promotion, they say, how much money do I get? Or what comes along with, you'll notice with Generation Y that if you say you'll get promoted to manager, a lot of them will say, I don't want to be a manager. How many of you have noticed that? And the reason for that is they, unless there's some sort of extra value for them, they don't want the added responsibility. They're kind of on to us. They've kind of figured out for us baby boomers who used to say, yes, I want a promotion, that, hey, it just means more hard work. So I'm not sure I want to do that level of work in order to move forward. So a different viewpoint on all of that. I want to give you a few company examples about multi-generations and what these companies are doing to manage them and work with them successfully. One of them, and these are, a range of examples. Two of them are retail, and one, of course, is social media. But Zappos, which is based in Las Vegas in the U.S., the owner, Tony Say, he since sold, by the way, Zappos to Amazon, so it's massive, it's huge. But one of the things that they've done very well, and that photo, by the way, is of me sitting in the royal chair in the HR division of Zappos. So just to let you know what Zappos does is they've made their culture so appealing to Generation X and Y, which is their dominant workforce. And Generation X and Y like to have fun and freedom and self-expression and the opportunity to give input and all of those things. So what Zappos did in their HR department is they actually encouraged every department to decorate in their choice of how they wanted to decorate. So if you walk by the human resources, they had it decked out as a royal environment, and every guest got to sit in the chair and get their photo taken. So behind me, all those squares are photos of previous people. And their walls are covered with visitors who've come to their offices and where they've taken photos. So they've created this real integrated, inclusive culture. When I walked by the marketing department, they were all dressed like Elvis Presley impersonators. And when you walked by, there was a little recorded voice that said, "Thank you for coming, thank you very much." When you walked by their marketing department, it was all decorated like a jungle, and they had stuffed monkeys hanging down from the ceiling. Now, I am not encouraging you to go back and do this in your offices. I'm simply giving you an example of companies that are appealing to Generation X and Y. And the reason that's appealing is it's fun, it's light, it's inclusive, it's very appealing to them. And by the way, the productivity is very high, profitability is their highest they've ever been. So if you're thinking as a businessman, yeah, well, that's nice, but they can't be doing good business. Business has improved as a result of adapting to the Generation X and Y sensibility. Facebook's a great example. Mark Zuckerberg, creator of Facebook, of how most of their employees are Generation Y. They have a tennis court. Now, I'm not imagining that any of you can do this, but they have a tennis court, they have a soccer field, they have all these amenities that are catered to playing for their employees because they get them to work hard. Now, by the way, the Generations Y at Facebook, this is another assumption we make about Generation Y, is that they don't want to work hours, right? They don't want to work long time. It's actually that they don't want to work standard hours, is the truth about Generation Y. So they're not so much a 9-to-5 culture. They're more of a, I'll get the work done culture, but let me adapt to it in my own time frame. That's why for those of you in this room who offer flexi time or alternate Fridays off, all of these are very appealing to Generation X and Y. That is what will make them want to work for you. I know when I talked to Nadia, she mentioned that BDC does do this, and that's one of the main attractors for many of their employees, is the fact that they have flexi time and that they have the alternate Fridays off. So Facebook does this and other types of things. They do, actually Facebook allows people to work from 11 p.m. till 7 a.m. because some of their Gen Ys prefer to work in the nighttime. So just noticing that. And then Best Buy is another example of a retail, although not doing so well right now in North America, but from a management of employee standpoint, does a very good job of managing their Generation Ys. They do a lot of social media integration within the organization. So they have internal instant messaging so that people can get instant answers. They have, everything's electronically connected, so if you walk in and ask somebody a question and they don't know the answer, they can BBM or text someone and get an instant answer. They have online portals. They have what they call the online water cooler, where everybody gets to go online and gossip by the water cooler, as long as it's positive gossip. That's the key factor. But these are examples of how the generations are influencing companies. So let's look a little bit more at the Zoomers, for those of us that are Zoomers in the room. So here's the thing about Zoomers, and here's the values that they bring to the workplace. And every generation, by the way, brings strengths. And that's the point of this presentation, is that we want to leverage the strengths of each of the generations so that we can build a really unified team moving forward. So the Zoomers have brought structure and process. And when I think back to, starting my working career in the 80s, it was the structure and process that was really, I liked that. That appealed to me. That there was rules and processes and policies and procedures and all of those things. And the structure and process that was set in place by the traditionalists and the baby boomers is how we got to where we are today. However, many of you in this room may have noticed that Generation Y is not as keen on structure, process, and rules. And I'm going to explain a little bit about that in a moment when we get to the Generation Ys. The other thing about Zoomers is we tend to resist change at first. And part of that is because in the past, if many of you have been with organizations where you've been restructured or downsized, we are kind of, every time any of that happens, we're always like a little bit afraid. It's like, oh, what's going to happen? A lot of Zoomers are attached to how things used to be. A lot of them think, well, if this changes, then we're going to end up, we've tried this before. All of that kind of language might be familiar language for some of us in this room. The good news about a Zoomer, though, is that they're willing to change once they see the rationale and the benefit for changing. And there's two benefits for changing. Number one, we get to stay in business. And number two, we get to evolve and grow to adapt to the changing realities of business. So adapting to technology is another thing that Zoomers are doing. And for many of us in this room, because a technology has been learned, we've actually become very quick at learning the new technology. And technology is continuing to simplify, which means that will level the playing field amongst all generations as technology continues to simplify. So the gap has been here because there's been a level of early adoption from the younger generations of the technology that's in place now, and then there's been a learning adaptation by Generation X and Zoomers. But as technology simplifies, the playing field levels, and it will change again. There will not be a gap. It'll be more about how can we get along with each other as people, and technology is no longer the factor. So I just want to share with you a case study of a Zoomer that I know. This person is in her early 50s. She was working in the employee placement industry, so she was helping organizations find employees. And she was recently restructured, and by restructured, they actually asked her to minimize her job and her hours. And she actually at first resisted the change. At first she went, oh, I don't know if I want to do this, but then realized there could be an opportunity here. She had created these cards called Gratitude and Soul Shine. She had done that as a creative project on the side, never thought anything of it, never thought of it as an entrepreneurial opportunity. It was something she had done on the side apart from her job. When she got restructured, she decided that she wanted to pursue entrepreneurism. And so she accepted the company's proposal that she moved down to 3 days a week work, and then she began to speak publicly and to build an online website to sell her Gratitude and Soul Shine cards. She's now turned that Gratitude and Soul Shine business into a very successful business and makes a nice level of income from there. So then she's gone to her employer and said, I'd like to reduce down to 1 day a week. So that's an example of a Zoomer who says, I'm going to adapt to what's happening. She actually had it in her mind that she thought she would retire traditionally and then realized that she wanted to refire. So she went back to school and upgraded her skills and did some of those things as well. And she actually decided also, in addition to saying 1 day a week, she's actually made herself available to do contract work with other employee placement organizations. So that's a case study example of a baby boomer that I'm talking about, where this is how things are changing. Now let's take a look at Generation X. As I mentioned, they're in their 30s to late 40s. Generation X are very project-focused. They really enjoy sinking their teeth into a project and watching that project start, middle, end, and then moving on to something new. The thing about Generation X is that they really like to see change, but they like to do new projects. They want new growth and new development. And what Gen X find, and for those of us that are Gen X in the room, you find yourself bridging between the Zoomer and the Generation Y. Many Gen Xers feel very stressed right now in their lives, and that's because right now they're in their prime family time of their years. They've got young families. Oftentimes they've got aging parents, so they're dealing with that issue in their lifetime as well. So they've got aging parents, young family, and then at work they're trying to manage Gen Ys who have a very different sensibility with the Zoomers, and they're trying to bridge that gap between the Zoomer and the Gen Y. Gen X is the smallest demographic in the workplace. Largest demographic right now is the baby boomer. Then largest demographic baby boomer. Second largest demographic Gen Y. And if it's not yet in your company, that will be the case as your boomers begin to move on and retire or refire. But Generation X is the smallest portion of the demographic in the workplace. And that's going to remain simply because the population of the Gen X group is smaller than both the Zoomer and the Generation Y. And in fact, right now they say we're in another baby boom because the birth rate in the last 3 years has been very high globally. So it'll be interesting to see the impact of that as we move forward. So with Gen X, I'll give you a Gen X case study here. This person worked in finance and insurance, and then she got restructured, and then she chose the entrepreneurial option. That person is me, and that's me bungee jumping. I bungee jumped. My birthday last year, my husband said, "What do you want for your birthday?" And I said, "Oh, I don't want anything material. I want an experience." He came home and gave me a card and said, "We're going bungee jumping." And I said to myself, "Do you still want to be married?" I give you myself as an example because I grew up in banking. I was in banking for 10 years. I got headhunted away to insurance, loved my job, got restructured in the early 90s, went and headed up a program for a mortgage insurance company, got restructured again. And in 1996, I said to myself, I don't really want to be at the whim of any employer. I would rather take my destiny in my own hands, and became an entrepreneur in 1996. So this is a classic Gen X, by the way. For the Gen X's in the room, you will stay loyal to your employer as long as you're provided entrepreneurial opportunities. And that is the ability to do project work, the ability to express yourself, the ability to have a say in what's happening. It's very important for a Generation X. Generation X, by the way, Generation Y, highest level of entrepreneurism, Generation X, second group of being entrepreneurs. So let's take a look at the Generation Y. As I said earlier, technology is innate. This is a generation who, born in the 80s, they were born with MTV, Atari, Nintendo, PlayStation. They've only known technology as part of their lifestyle. And social media in the last 5 years has totally taken over the way we communicate. I have a video, I'm not showing it today because of time, but I have a video of showing how fast social media is changing. There's a statistic that if Facebook were a country, it would be the 3rd largest country in the world, the number of members that are on Facebook. Okay? So looking at the impact of social media, if we look at that and we look at how it's changing the way we connect, if you're a baby boomer, you might look at social media and think, well, you know, and I know that you're a very social media savvy culture, but a lot of people still see social media as a waste of time. It's actually the new reality. And Gen Y are very attracted to organizations who have high levels of technology solutions, high levels of social media, depending on your privacy and how you're allowed to use social media within your organization. If you're a smaller-based entrepreneur, then you know that social media is crucial to our business moving forward. It's a global culture. It's the only way to communicate our brand and what we offer. If you're an entrepreneur in this room and export is something that you're interested in doing, then social media is an absolute crucial must. But social media that's not just letting people know what you do or what you are, but how your value values other people in other countries. So huge export opportunity with social media. And then, of course, Gen Y are very globally minded. They're much more philanthropic than any previous generation. Generation Y wants to help others, underprivileged. They want to make a difference in the world. I could give you many, many stories about philanthropic Gen Ys. I'll give you one example of a Gen Y who entered a Wendy's restaurant and entered the Wendy's restaurant and was sitting there eating his burger, and he watched this hearing impaired customer walk up to order their meal with an interpreter. So they walk up to order their meal with the interpreter, and the Gen Y's watching this, and the hearing impaired person is sign languaging what they want to order, and the interpreter is speaking the order to the order taker. And the Gen Y is sitting there and he goes, wow, wouldn't it be great if there was a technology solution for interpretation? And he went home and created a glove that goes on the main signing hand of a hearing impaired individual, and as they sign language, it's interpreted onto their personal device for anybody to read in any language of their choice. Gen Y. And I have hundreds of other stories just like that. They are the most creative generation. They are the most philanthropic generation. And as entrepreneurs, if your organization is philanthropic, that's very attractive to Generation Y. It's attractive to all generations. If your organization has technology and allows technology solutions, very attractive to Generation Y. Just a fun little exercise at your table here. I believe you do have pen and paper, yes? So you can find pen and paper somewhere. I would like one person at your table to be the note taker for this exercise. Please delegate that person right now. Choose who that person's going to be. And this is just a little test on creativity. So note taker, here's what you're going to do. Note taker, you're going to capture the ideas around your table, and here's the exercise, and I'm only going to say it once, so please listen carefully. Here's your exercise. As a group at your table, I want you to tell your note taker, and note taker, you will write these down, 10 things that a cat and a refrigerator have in common. There are no wrong answers. Go ahead now. Tell your note taker 10 things that a cat and a refrigerator have in common.
As you can see...
Sorry, ignore that. Continue the exercise. Go as quickly as you can, and as soon as your group has 10, put up your hand. Is there anybody who has 5? 6, excellent. Anybody who have more than 6? Does anybody have 8 yet? 30 more seconds. Okay, time's up. I believe your table, you have 7 now? Okay, so we'll go with your table. Would one of you please say, and I'll repeat it for the room, so please say the 7 that you came up with. Go ahead. Both store milk. They both have an owner. The cat has a cold nose and the fridge is cold. They clean regularly or get cleaned. Okay. Both have 4 feet. Both make sounds. And they both could be white. Excellent job. Round of applause for this table, please. Are there any extra ideas that you can shout out to me that were not said? They both share energy? Both have energy? Is that what I heard? Yes, that's true. Yes, any others? Both important part of the family? Pardon me? Come in different colors, yes? Both have heating elements. Excellent. So there, I want you to know there are 50 possible answers to that exercise. And so notice our response. I'm going to ask, are there any Gen Ys at your table? Yes, see? That's my point exactly. So typically for Generation Y, the creative exercise is very easy because they're used to doing this kind of thing, putting ideas together. For us baby boomers and Gen X, it's a little bit more of a, and for, how many of you found yourself going into your head going, a cat in a refrigerator, right? So right away you went to judgment versus, oh, they both give off static electricity. They both can be found inside the house or outside the house. They both have a box, a litter box and a fridge box. They both have a cord or a tail. 50 different ideas, right? So just noticing the level of creativity. Now this next slide I'm going to show you, if I can get my slides back up. This is a movie clip. Remember I said that Generation Y does not like rules? Take a look at this movie clip.
As you can see, I have provided everything a child might need. All right, clearly we need to set some rules. Rule number 1, you will not touch anything.
What about the floor?
Yes, you may touch the floor.
What about the air?
Yes, you may touch the air.
What about this?
Ah! Where did you get that?
Found it.
Okay, rule number 2, you will not bother me while I'm working. Rule number 3, you will not cry, or whine, or laugh, or giggle, or sneeze, or burp, or fart. So no annoying sounds, right?
Does this count as annoying?
How many of you know someone just like that? Yeah. So let's look at a Gen Y case study and take a look at that comic that's on that slide. It says, I hate to criticize, but you've only been employed here for 2 days and you're already 3 weeks behind in your work. By the way, that's funny, but not really funny because it's a reality. But also with Gen Y, how many of you have noticed they do not receive criticism the same way that we were taught to receive criticism? Have you noticed that? And part of that is because they have parents, just like you and I, who've told them their whole life this exact story. And this is what my husband and I said to our daughter, Courtney. Courtney, you can be or do anything. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. If you get a job that you're not happy with, quit. If you don't get grades that you're not happy with, negotiate with your teacher. How many of you have done this with your parenting, right? So what shows up is they end up at work and they go, hello, I'm here. And then they don't take criticism because they've not really been criticized. They've been told about how good they are. So it's a shift in how we actually give feedback. And in my leadership skills training and consulting that I do, we spend a lot of time on feedback. Generation Y wants real-time feedback. They don't want to wait 1 year for a performance review. That's antiquated HR, in my opinion, anyway. The annual performance review does not measure performance for any generation in today's environment. Performance needs to be measured on a regular, consistent basis so that people can improve their performance regularly with regular feedback. There's an excellent website called Ripple, rypple.com. Please go there, and it's about real-time performance evaluation. rypple.com, ripple.com. Generation Y is really pushing this whole feedback mechanism. They're saying, why would I work and you not give me feedback for a year, and then you're going to tell me in a year everything that I did wrong? What I'd rather have you do is tell me what I'm doing right when I'm doing it right so I can continue to do that. And as all generations, don't we all want that? And yet, the old system has been the annual performance review, and that was partly because the structure allowed for regular review, but we're now evolving to a much faster, more real-time focused workplace that requires all of us to get feedback immediately. So here's a Gen Y case study. This person graduated college and university. She found a job, and she left 1 year later. And the reason she left was because she hated her boss. And by the way, Generation Y don't leave their jobs, they leave their leaders. They want to like you, they want to connect with you, they want to be able to respect you, they want to know that you have a life, they want to work with you, and they will work very hard for people that they love. In other words, if they're likable and interactive and you provide and you're willing to mentor them and you show that you care, they will stay longer. And that's where I talked about the 3 years. This person now works for a boss she absolutely loves, and she's not thinking of leaving at any time soon simply because she's happy right now. How many of you in this room have left bosses that you didn't like? Yeah. When I was in banking, the reason I left the bank, A, I got headhunted away, but second, my boss's name was Hal. It should have been Hell. And when I left, he said, "You'll be back, and when you come back, you'll come crawling back." And those are the best words he ever could have said to me, because I never went back. But I believe that today we do not have the luxury of working for poor leaders, because we need to retain the people that we have. And in order to recruit, we need to have the highest level of leadership skill possible. And Generation Y points to that. Not sure if any of you are familiar with IKEA, the do-it-yourself, but there's an extreme example of please have a seat. In other words, you've got to put your seat together before you can sit down. But that is the new reality for all of us as well. There is no certainty, there's no structure. And I want to finalize with these 8 tips to manage and lead the generations. And once again, I'll repeat that the slides are available, and I will make those available to you. So here's some things you need to really think about. So hiring needs to include career path and educational opportunities and talent pool sharing. These are things we need to consider as entrepreneurs. When you're interviewing, you need to ask the people you're interviewing to conduct a real work task. Oftentimes people get very frustrated when hiring Gen X and Y because they'll say, well, when I interviewed them, they said that they could do this. But what you didn't do is ask them to actually do the task to test their capability. And so, for example, if typing is a huge part of the job, then you need to do a typing test or a typing trial. My daughter's going back to school to get her legal secretary's course. She's earning her bachelor's towards psychology, but she's gone back to also get the legal secretary. And she had to do a typing test, and she said, "Mom, I have no idea if I'm going to pass." I said, "You're Gen Y, you'll pass." She did 60 words a minute without any form of, remember, for those of us, again, we're showing our age. Do you remember when we learned to type and it was like, you had to, on the old typewriters? How many of you remember DOS? Yes? Okay. Really dating myself. The other thing you need to do is really understand their personality along with their generation. So I've spent this morning sharing with you generational tips, but every one of us in this room has different personalities. So you might be more of a driver personality or a social personality or an analytical personality or an empathetic personality. A really good leader understands who their teams are, and they focus on their strengths. And these are really important points. One of the things I do when I work with my consulting clients is I have them actually conduct a very simple personality assessment when they are interviewing and hiring. And I also get them to do that as a team training with their staff so that people can better understand each other and work more collaboratively together. And then the fourth one on this slide is focus on their strengths and what they do well. And this is across the generations. Rather than focusing on what they're not doing well, focus on what they do really well and really capitalize on that. For instance, Generation Y, we know that they're really good at technology. For any of you with Gen Y employees, leverage their ability to know the technology. Really progressive organizations are doing what I call reverse mentoring. So typical mentoring is the wisest and the oldest person mentors down to the youngest. Reverse mentoring is the youngest, most technically savvy person mentors up through the organization. And these are some really innovative practices that are happening. And the remaining 4 tips are train them on understanding each other better through generational awareness. So I'm happy for you to share my slides and the content of what I've shared with you today, to take that back to your room, your offices, to your rooms. I don't know where that came from. Maybe because I'm staying in the hotel, I'm thinking room. Take it back to your offices and your businesses and share with them some of the tips. Share with them the copy of my ebook, which every one of you will receive complimentary. Nadia will be sending that to you. It's an ebook version of my book, 101 Ways to Make Generations X, Y, and Zoomers Happy at Work. So please go through that and share that with others as well. Focus on further improving your leadership skills of your leaders. For you yourself, you need to be, in fact, in my experience, the organizations, one of my taglines that I work with my clients is this: I help leaders to grow so that they can grow the business. The higher level that this leadership skill is, the more successful the business is. Build flexi time and alternate Fridays off into your scheduling to the level that you're capable to do this. This is the new reality of the future. And focus on real-time recognition and reward, which I already shared with you. There is the website URL. For those of you that can't wait to get it emailed to you, please take a few moments to write this down. It's basically just my website, CherylCran.com/Business Development Company Limited, Trinidad, all with a hyphen between. I'll give you a few moments to write that down. And I'll leave that up while I leave you with my final story. And this story, by the way, it's not a religious story, even though I use the word atheist and God and Christian. I just want you to really listen to the moral of the story. And the moral of story is this: be careful who you're asking to do the changing. If you were listening to my presentation, you're going, well, that's nice about Gen Y. They need to be more like us. Or if you were listening as a Gen Y and going, well, that's nice, those baby boomers need to get on the technology train. Or if you're listening as a Gen X and going, they both need help. If you're thinking other people need to change over you, then you want to listen to this final story. So one day, this atheist is walking through the woods, and it's a gorgeous day, blue sky, green trees, absolutely gorgeous day. And without any warning, this huge bear jumps out of the woods in front of the atheist. And the atheist screams at the top of her lungs, "Oh my God!" And everything freezes, including the bear with his paws overhead. And this big booming voice comes out of the sky and says, "You call on me now." And the atheist says, "Yes." And the big booming voice says, "After all these years, are you finally willing to become a Christian?" And the atheist says, "No, but could you make the bear one?" And the big booming voice says, "Thy will be done." And the bear, who was frozen with his paws overhead, slowly brought them together, smiled, bared his teeth, looked right at the atheist and said, "Lord, please bless this food that I'm about to eat." So be careful who you're asking to do the changing. Thank you so much. I'll be available for questions. Thank you.